We're ready to go, Chair.
Super, thank you for that. Hello, good evening everyone, and welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Licensing and Safety Committee for Tuesday the 13th of October 2020. My name is Chris Cade, I'm a councillor for Bilton and I'm the chair of the Licensing and Safety Committee, and consequently I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. So we'll start off with agenda part 1, public business, and we're starting with minutes. I'm very conscious that there's one set of committee minutes from almost a year ago now, and I believe, Sophie, that we had a query about that a week or two ago.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The slight amendment has been made.
Thank you. So what we're seeking to do is to confirm the minutes of last year's meeting and also for the 4 subcommittees on the dates listed. Do I take it everyone's in favour? I don't think we were meant to be receiving that.
Do we just raise hands, yeah?
Yes, please,
Yep,
if you wouldn't
please.
mind. Thank you.
I finally remembered to raise my own. How are we doing, Lynn?
I think we've got 7 hands up at the moment.
Chair, it's Andrew speaking. I won't vote because I wasn't in those meetings.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
So we've got 7 for yes, have we?
Yes, you've got 7 for, yes.
Right, if we'd like to take our hands down now. All hands down, please. And do we have anyone who's against agreeing the minutes? I can't see any there. And we have 1 abstention from Andrew, obviously, because he wasn't actually at the meeting last year, which makes sense to me. We're happy with that, Lynn?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. On to item 2, apologies. I'm aware that that Lee Hunt has sent Andrew Byrne as a substitute, and I believe that Tim has submitted his apologies. So I have 2 apologies there. Does anyone have any more?
Yes, I think it's apologies from Councillor Lee Hunt and Councillor Douglas. And as you say, Councillor Byrne is substitute for Councillor Lee Hunt.
Thank you very much. On to item 3, declarations of interest. So do I have any declarations on section A, the non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors? Any declarations under part A? Okay, I don't see any. Moving on, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors? So under B, do we have any declarations? And once again, I don't see any. Thank you. And part C, a notice under section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Any declarations there? And once again, I don't see any. Thank you very much. That's declarations. So we are now on to item 4, which is the draft Hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy. So we're going over to you, Zolfi, are we?
Thank you, Chair. There was an 8-week public consultation was undertaken between 10th of September 2019 and the 7th of November 2019. Consulted with the public and taxi private hire trade, the local MP, trading standards, Rugby Disability Forum. Drivers were written out to, also it was placed on our website, and performers were sent to drivers. The background to this, the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976 and the Town and Police Clauses Act 1847 provide the main regulatory framework within which Rugby Borough Council carry out its licensing functions in respect of hackney carriage and private hire vehicles. For the purposes of these acts, Rugby Borough Council is the relevant licensing authority. Our current licensing policy for hackney carriage and private hire vehicles was adopted in April 2009 and has been subject to some updates and addendums since adoption. The current policy now requires replacement to ensure Rugby Borough Council has in place a policy which reflects best practice among licensing authorities, changes in the regulatory landscape and the future priorities and aspirations of Rugby Borough Council. For example, reducing impact on air quality and the environment. Whilst there is no statutory requirement for Rugby Borough Council to have a policy relating to the licensing of hackney carriages and private hire vehicles, it is considered to do so. Once a policy is in place, there is no statutory requirement to undertake a review of that policy. But as a matter of good practice, policies should be kept under review and updated or replaced where appropriate. The new policy sets out how Rugby Borough Council will discharge its function as licensing authority and provides guidance to members, prospective applicants, licence holders and the wider public as to the regulation of the hackney carriage and private hire trade. In particular, it sets out the licence application process and requirements, how licence applications are determined, including the application of the fit and proper person test, ongoing requirement of licence holders, Rugby Borough Council's complaints and enforcement regime, including a new penalties point scheme, Rugby Borough's council partnership working with other agencies, vehicle specifications, fares and fees. Financial implications. The licensing of hackney carriages and private hire vehicles is funded through fees and charges which will be set annually by full council. Rugby Borough Council, as a licensing authority, can only recover the cost of providing the licensing service and cannot return a profit. Any surpluses generated will be invested back into the licensing service. Implementation of the new policy should be financially self-sufficient and should not require the allocation of additional subsidies or funding in the Rugby Borough Council budget. Now, moving on to our environmental implications. In 2004, Rugby Borough Council declared the whole of the urban area as an air quality management area. One of Rugby Borough Council's objectives under the Air Quality Action Plan is to improve air quality within the air quality management area. Then the main pollutants of concern in the urban area are associated with road traffic. Hackney carriages and private hire vehicles operate within the air quality management area and increase traffic volumes in and around our town centre. The policy introduces new requirements relating to ultra-low emission vehicles, which will have a positive impact on our air quality and will contribute to Rugby Borough Council's meeting its air quality targets. Legal implications. Without a robust policy, officers and members will find it extremely difficult to make appropriate and consistent licensing decisions and to take proportionate enforcement action. As a consequence, the council will face significant difficulty in justifying the way it has reached licensing decisions and taken enforcement action. This will result in Rugby Borough Council failing to adequately deliver its licensing function or control compliance of hackney carriage and private hire vehicle trades with the regulatory regime. This will lead to an increased risk of successful appeals by applicants who have had their licences suspended or revoked, service complaints to the local government ombudsman, judicial review, legal challenge to any criminal proceedings instigated by the council, and reputational and professional damage to the council. Equality and diversity. There are no equality and diversity implications arising from this report. The options available. Number one, that the new hackney carriage private hire licence policy be recommended to the council for adoption. There is no risk. Benefit would be compliance with statutory duties as a licensing authority and a robust enforcement regime in place to protect the public. 2, to take no further action. Risk there would be non-compliance with statutory duties as a licensing authority and continued reliance on an out-of-date policy which may present enforcement challenges. The benefit would be none. Recommendations would be: number 1, the head of environment and public realm to be given delegated authority to make non-material changes to the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire licensing policy to correct any typos, cross-references and internal inconsistencies. Number 2, it is recommended to the Council that the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire licensing policy be considered and adopted. The Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976 and the Town Clauses Act 1847 provide the main regulatory framework within which Rugby Borough Council carries out its licensing functions in respect of Hackney Carriage and Private Hire vehicles. Under these acts, Rugby Borough Council has a duty to provide for licensing of Hackney carriages, private hire vehicles, drivers of both and operators of private hire vehicles. For the purposes of these acts, Rugby Borough Council is a relevant licensing authority. Whilst it is recognised that this duty requires an efficient and effective administrative process, the fundamental purpose of the licensing regime is to protect the safety of the public. This means that Rugby Borough Council must ensure that only fit and proper persons are licensed to be drivers, operators and holders of vehicle licences, and that vehicles remain safe and fit for purpose of transporting fare-paying customers. This report considers whether a new Hackney Carriage and Private Hire licensing policy should be recommended to the Council for consideration and adoption. The new policy is written to assist Rugby Borough Council in discharging its licensing function and protecting the safety of the public. Unlike the Licensing Act 2003 and the Gambling Act, the legislation that specifically controls the licensing of Hackney carriages and private hire vehicles, drivers and operators, does not contain provisions that require Rugby Borough Council to prepare and publish a Hackney Carriage and Private Hire licensing policy in a particular manner. Nevertheless, Regulators Code 2014, which has a statutory effect by the virtue of Legislative and Regulatory Reform Act 2006, means Rugby Borough Council must have regard to the requirements of the Code A, robust Hackney Carriage and Private Hire licensing policy to guide licensing activities, will ensure that Rugby Borough Council satisfies its legal responsibilities with respect to specific elements of the Regulators Code, and will assist in demonstrating that Rugby Borough Council has had due regard to the Code in relation to this particular area of law. Rugby Borough's current licensing policy for Hackney carriages and private hire vehicles was adopted in 2009. Since then, there has been the Deregulation Act, which has led to a significant increase in cross-border hiring, which is creating an increasing risk to Hackney carriage and private hire licensing functions undertaken by Rugby Borough Council. In effect, if a driver applies to Rugby Borough Council for a licence and this application is refused, it is still possible that a neighbouring authority may licence the driver based upon the same information but assessed against a different policy criteria. Once a driver is granted a licence by another authority, they are then able to operate across Rugby and other areas despite initially being refused the licence by this council. This situation poses a potential risk to public safety as well as the reputation of the local government as a whole. The existing legislative framework makes it extremely difficult to have any meaningful influence over this risk. Consequently, it is important to recognise the significant responsibility Rugby Borough Council has to use all appropriate mechanisms and opportunities, including those that ensure close working arrangements are in place with other local authorities to support and protect Rugby Borough Council's community and communities outside of its immediate responsibility. Now, on the 21st of July, the Department of Transport issued the statutory taxi and private hire standard guidance for the first time, which replaced the relevant section of the best practice guidance issued by the department back in 2010, where there is a conflict between the statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards and the best practice guidance in the department issue on taxi and private hire licenses. The standards take precedence. The statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards is the result of extensive consultation with the police, Institute of Licensing, the trade, and sets out the approach that the licensing authorities must adopt when carrying out their function. It is a reassuring note that Rugby Borough Council has already previously implemented a number of the recommendations in the standards, and these will continue to be incorporated in our new policy. Taking into consideration all the changes over the last 10 years, the current policy now requires replacement to ensure that Rugby Borough Council has in place a policy which reflects best practice amongst licensing authorities, addresses changes and the regulatory landscape such as deregulation. The draft policy was brought before this Licensing Safety Committee in September 2019, and the draft policy was approved to go out for consultation. Following the consultation, the policy has been amended and revised. The policy is now attached, which has been circulated to all the members. The key changes that we have made are DBS checks. At present, all applicants for licenses, whether a new grant or a renewal, are required to submit an enhanced DBS certificate. It is proposed that the council carry out the initial DBS disclosure, and the applicants will be required to subscribe to the DBS update service and maintain that service for life of the private hire or Hackney Carriage dual driver's licence. This will allow licensing officers to do 6 monthly online checks to ensure the status of the DBS system certificate remains clear within the term. Secondly, safeguarding and child sexual exploitation. The committee will be familiar with the issues of CSE that were highlighted by the Rotherham and Rochdale cases. Taxi drivers have a unique role to play in transporting the general public, and this can give them a valuable insight into legal activities such as CSE that may be taking place. The draft policy includes a requirement that all new Hackney Carriage and private hire drivers must undertake approved CSE awareness training before a licence can be issued, as to equip them with the knowledge and skills to identify signs of potential abuse and how they should respond. We're also looking at introducing a private hire driver's licence. At present, we only issue a dual driver's licence. We propose to issue a private hire driver's licence, and the applicants will have to undertake a knowledge test. The test comprises an exam covering the following areas: the highway code, the council's vehicle conditions and driver code, safeguarding and child sexual exploitation awareness, disability awareness, local knowledge, working out fares and giving change, the understanding of and testing of written English. An 85% pass mark is required. Private hire operators at present do not have to do a knowledge test. It is proposed that applicants will be required to pass a knowledge test on the condition of our operator's licence and private hire vehicle licences. The pass rate for that will be set at 90%. Now, most importantly, looking at emissions from 1st of March 2021, any new application for a Hackney Carriage vehicle which is licensed for the first time would need to be a wheelchair accessible vehicle and must be ultra low emission or zero emission. This is defined as a taxi emitting less than 50 g CO2 and capable of travelling at least 70 miles without emissions at all. These vehicles will be licensed for 14 years. From 1st of January 2022, all new and existing private hire vehicles must not be older than 3 years of age when licensed for the first time. The vehicles must be Euro 4 petrol or Euro 6 diesel engines. These vehicles will be licensed for 10 years. From 1st of March 2004, all new and existing replacement wheelchair accessible vehicles, Hackney Carriage vehicles, must be new wheelchair accessible, ultra low emission or zero emission. Again, these vehicles will be licensed for 14 years. Any existing replacement saloon hackney carriage vehicle must be ultra low emission or zero emission. This is defined as a taxi emitting less than 50 Gs CO2 and capable of travelling at least 70 miles without emissions at all. These vehicles again will be licensed for 14 years. We're also looking at introducing the penalty points. The aim of a penalty point scheme is to work in conjunction with other enforcement options. It provides a formalised stepped enforcement plan. The purpose of the scheme is to record misdemeanours and to act as a record of drivers' behaviour and conduct, so as to ascertain whether they are fit and proper person to hold a licence. It does not prejudice the Council's ability to take other actions. The primary objective of the penalty point scheme is to improve the level of compliance and help improve the standards, safety and the protection of the travelling public. There is no legal duty specifically placed on Rugby Borough Council to consult with respect to this type of policy, but it is good practice to do so and in line with the Department for Transport, Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Best Practice Guide. All relevant licence holders were notified in writing and the consultation and invited to respond. This policy is a key document in providing guidance to members, prospective applicants, licence holders and the wider public. Adopting an up-to-date policy will enable Rugby Borough Council to make robust and consistent decisions when discharging its licensing function. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zolfi. It's quite a technical area. What are we doing here? Hello? I think I've...
You can hear you, Chris.
You can.
Chair? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the huge amount of work. I know that for the whole of the last year, you and colleagues have been going through this, and there's an incredible amount of detail to work through. And I also like to empathise with members on the committee who've received the rather large report and had not a great deal of time to read through the final draft. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for their efforts on both those scores. And if we just give Zolfi a minute or two to get his breath back, does anyone have any questions for clarification or any points they'd like to raise? So I can see a hand up from Councillor Barrow. Julie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, because this consultation actually took place a whole year ago, and we now find ourselves in a very different place than where we were economically 12 months ago, has the council received any representations from drivers or drivers' organisations about the policy to only licence ultra-low emission vehicles from March next year, considering that that is not very far away and these vehicles are, as we know, very expensive? Thank you, Chair.
Zolfi?
Thank you. Firstly, the next stage of the meeting, I'll go through the figures. People have renewed and have had no issues. No comments have come since the consultation or during this period. Nobody's written to us and said that you've got a new policy here. It's been advertised, this meeting's been advertised, the trade know this meeting was taking place. We've had nothing through. It's a stepped process of getting these ultra emission vehicles on. Originally it's for people coming into the trade, who are new into the trade. So it's a stepped process. So it's not likely to cause an impact on the existing drivers.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Could I just ask a supplementary as to why the vehicles, once they are 7 years old, need to be relicensed every 6 months?
Once, on average, taxis do 30,000 miles a year between 20 and 30,000. This will give opportunity to vehicles to be tested more regularly at 6 monthly basis. This is when problems start in vehicles. You start getting defects coming across, so compliance checks can be done, and then the plates will be issued. Financially, it won't have a impact on the drivers, not a big impact, but it will make the fleet safer for the public who use the taxis, because we'll be able to inspect them on a 6 monthly basis. Once a vehicle goes over a certain age, it starts doing mileage. There's bits that start deteriorating of vehicles, and we've noticed that when vehicles have gone for compliance, they're failing. So there'll be extra measure put in place for public safety.
Okay, thank you. It was a very full answer.
Okay, I did have one other hand up, I think, Councillor Garcia.
Sorry, Chair. Zulfi's already answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're on to Councillor Andrew Byrne.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mine's just a general question for my information, really. It was interesting to read about vehicles that take disabled people. And I was just wondering about those vehicles with the taximeter in. Are they audio or are they only visual? I'm thinking if somebody is blind, they're totally reliant on somebody telling them what the fare is, unless there's something that tells them audially that it's whatever the charge is. How is there a cross check on that in any way?
Good question, Zulfi.
Thank you. Our current meters are only audio, and I haven't come across any meter, visual. I haven't come across any audio meters anywhere. If there is a problem and a member of public complains, we roughly know what the fares are. We can calculate them from the chart. Luckily, in Rugby, we haven't had that problem. We haven't had any complaints where somebody's charged someone who's blind more than what's on the meter. We have had complaints where drivers had tried to charge more for wheelchair customers, etc. That's something that we can look at in the future, bearing in mind technology changes.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought that maybe taximeters could be modified, or when the new ones are produced, to include some audio facility within it. But thank you for your answer.
I will feed that back to the taxi providers in Digitex who produce meters, as REM4 who produce meters, there's Cygnus. So I will feed that back to them. So I'll feed your comments back.
Thank you, Zulfi. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brader.
Thank you. Just looking through the consultation feedback, I noticed something had to be amended to do with the Deregulation Act, where it said that it's lawful to subcontract a booking. I just wondered if there was any oversight over who the bookings are subcontracted to, or whether the operators have to inform the licensing authority.
Sophie?
Thank you, Chair. Our hands are tied. We've got people who've got operators licenses from Wolverhampton who are cross-bordering, but should a complaint arise, this policy will make it easier for us to work in partnership with neighbouring authorities for enforcement purposes, etc. And we're already doing that. As a result, there was some action taken recently, which I'll go through in the private part of this meeting.
Okay, I just thought I'd double check. David, did you have anything you wanted to add at all?
Not specifically on that matter, as Sophie has mentioned. We do have some concerns about that particular piece of legislation, and so have the committee previously. And we may be asking whether you wish us to write to the Secretary of State again to raise a number of issues.
I note your use of the word again. I seem to recall having done it before.
Indeed you did, Chair, and sadly the government declined to respond to your request.
Oh well, perhaps we will be writing again then. Okay, so at item 4 then with the draft Hackney carriage.
Sorry, Chris, could I just interrupt?
Yes,
I've got
certainly.
my hand up.
I do apologise.
Good. It's just probably a very silly question actually for Zulfi, but I was just concerned a bit about the safety of people in rugby when we're having these. I know there was a spate of people being licensed elsewhere very easily. Was it Sheffield or somewhere? And then we were finding that they were in rugby. Obviously, there's nothing we can do to stop that. But is there any way that we could maybe make our things more prominent so that people knew that they were getting into a car that had been licensed in rugby and had gone through this criteria, which is actually quite stringent, instead of it being quite small on the back of the car? I was just wondering if there was anything we could do to help the trade with that.
Councillor Garcia, thank you. A lot of background work's been going on. The police are engaging with us when DBS checks are done. You've got the NR3 revocation register, so if somebody's been revoked from another authority, so information is being fed back and local authorities are working in partnership now. So we are heading in the right direction. With us, our vehicles, our Hackney carriages, which people can flag down, clearly stand out with they're all white. They have the checkered stripes. The people who are booking private hire vehicles are booking them mostly through an app-based company, so they know where the vehicle's been booked through, and it can be traced, or if it's booked through an operator, it can be traced. So there are those measures in place at the present time. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. That's great. Thank you.
So just checking then, is there anyone else? I can't see any more hands up at the moment. Any more takers? No? Okay, thank you for that. So at item 4 then, Zulfi, are you looking for a vote at this point for the committee to agree for this policy to go forward?
Absolutely, yes, please. We need this policy to follow the statutory guidance and to make rugby a safe place. And so, yes, please.
So we're looking for that to go in conjunction with we've invited more comments, haven't we, for a consultation between September the 10th and November the 7th?
No, this was the consultation that took place last year. Yeah, so there's no more consultations now. We've had the consultations, we've had the comments. Now it needs to go to it needs to be adopted so we can carry the function out. Okay, so everyone's had the opportunity to read what we've got, although I appreciate there's a hell of a lot of pages there. Zulfi and his colleagues have spent a year working on it. So could we take a vote, please, for this to move forward? Both in favour?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Could we just have a formal approver and seconder, nominator and seconder for the resolution, please, just for our records?
I'll be more than happy to propose it. I think it's a vast improvement actually, and I'm really happy that you've added the not the tobacco, the vaping onto it. That was a great move. Thank you.
I'll second it as well. That's Sue.
I'll third it. Okay, so you've got those, Sarah. You're happy now?
I am, thank you. David, you've got your hand up, but you're not a member. Did you have a point?
I do apologise. Before we went to vote, I just wanted a bit of clarification from you, Sarah, because you may be aware that the senior management team is under review at the moment. And I think officially at the minute, we haven't actually got a head of environment and public realm because the current occupier has now been made the deputy executive director. So I just wanted clarification on that particular point and whether we should have perhaps an equivalent or something.
So the resolution as drafted in the committee report can stand, and under our constitution, the executive director has the ability to exercise all heads of service powers, so can exercise in the absence of a head of environment and public realm. Excellent. Thank you for that, Sarah. No problem.
Super. So on that basis, we've got a proposer, we've got a seconder. Now I see some more hands up now. Andrew, is that a vote or have you got another query? Oh, it's gone down again.
No, it's a vote, Chair.
Okay, so those in favour of this policy moving forward as described, please vote now. I've even remembered to have raised my own hand. Excellent.
That's unanimous then, Chair.
Super. Thank you very much, everyone. On the basis it's unanimous, I won't call for against or abstentions. So, moving on to agenda item number 5, which is regard to COVID-19. Is that starting with you, David, or is that Henry?
It will start with me, if that's okay, Chair.
Please.
I apologise for this being a verbal update. As you can imagine, the whole situation with COVID is changing very rapidly and has been going on a very significant amount of time. So I'll ask in a moment for Zolfi and Henry to give the overview of what actions they've taken, and then you can obviously ask us any questions about that. What I do want to say is that I am extremely pleased with the way that my teams, and therefore your teams, have responded to the COVID crisis. They have put themselves out, they've cancelled leave, they've filled additional shifts, they've changed very rapidly to their new roles. They've gone into partnership working with people like Trading Standards, Public Health, the police. And so I wanted that on record because they have done a large amount of work, all the teams, over the last 6 months or so. Having said that, I think you should also be aware of the things that the council have done, and the people like Sarah, she took over the food bank. Michelle Dixon took over the shielding hub, which was providing food for vulnerable people. Everyone has played a very active part in this, and I think this is the first real opportunity we've had to actually give you an insight into exactly how much work that has been. So I just wanted to say that because as I say, I'm extremely pleased with my teams over that. We've responded right from the very start. We are traditionally considered to be public health professionals and safety professionals, and therefore it fitted in very neatly with the work that we were doing. It has meant that if any of you are on any of the committees that scrutinise our performance, that some of our traditional performance indicators have gone slightly out of the window, but that does not in any way detract from the amount of work that has been done. And I think at this point it is probably best if I go over to Zolfi to start, if that's okay, so he can explain what the licensing team in particular have been doing, because that obviously is one of the key things that you're likely to be interested in.
Thank you for that, Dovi. Over to Zolfi. Oh, sorry, Carrie Ann, have you got your hand up?
Sorry, I'm still in an accident now. Sit down now.
It is, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The pandemic forced a rapid rethink on all areas of life, not least of which on licence holders, business owners, and those tasked with their regulation, who had to adapt quickly and decisively to rules and restrictions. Licensing functions are not statutory, but essential to A, enable businesses and individuals to work within the law, B, promoting the licensing objectives, C, support the economy and employment at local and national level. At the start of the pandemic, the team was busy dealing with inquiries from businesses looking to operate legitimately, but different to business as usual. Off sales and delivery sales of alcohol from pubs was an option explored by many businesses. There were also some cancellations of some events across the borough. We gave consideration to the use of digital technology as an alternative to face-to-face interaction, and this has been implemented where possible. The administrative day-to-day work of the team did not reduce. The team were able to maintain their functions and continue to meet statutory timescales throughout lockdown, Work of the team has been absolutely key to keeping the general public safe. Licensing team play a key role in promoting the town centre and business recovery. The new pavement licence regime under the Business and Planning Act is an example. Prior to the reopening of the premises, the team made contact with licence holders in the town centre, on the outskirts, to help them to prepare for reopening. Again, we worked in partnership with Henry's team. Referrals were made to Henry's team, where Henry's team went out, carried out inspections, gave further technical advice where required so people could comply with legislation and open safely. On 25th of June 2020, the government published the Business Planning Bill, which proposed 2 significant measures to support businesses. One of these proposed measures was to create a new temporary pavement licence to be issued by councils authorising the use of removable furniture on part of the public highway adjacent to any premises that are used to sell or serve food and drink supplied from or in connection with these premises. The other proposed measure was to temporarily amend the Licensing Act 2003 so as to direct that any premises holding a premises licence authorising on sales of alcohol is deemed also for authorising off sales. For the pavement licensing, we at Rugby Borough Council received 4 applications. 2 applications were granted, 1 was refused, and 1 application was incomplete. Now, moving on to taxis. If we can have the slides, John. Now, with taxis, there has been a small drop in renewals compared to the same period last year. We've got some charts which are prepared and John will share with you shortly. Members of the team spent a lot of time giving advice to drivers regarding benefits and grants available that put drivers in a position to pay for their renewals and carry on trading. As you'll see from these figures, you've got current licensed dual drivers now and the dual drivers last year during the same period. So there's been a slight drop. There's been a slight drop in the licensed Hackney carriage vehicles and private hire vehicles. Now, the information we have, this hasn't been a direct result or impact of COVID. Some people have retired. There's 2 vehicles that haven't been renewed due to COVID. Now, moving on to the Licensing Act, looking at premises licenses. Again, there's been a slight drop, but we have had a new business open in this period, which required a premises licence in the town centre. There's been some variations, and we've only had 2 surrenders of licences, which is the same as last year. Currently, we have 387 licensed premises. A personal licence is required by anyone authorising the sale of alcohol from a licensed premises. All licensed premises must have an allocated personal licence holder known as a designated premises supervisor of alcohol. Again, there's been a slight decrease between now and last year, but not big changes. So it's been business as usual. The house-to-house collections have dropped slightly due to the pandemic. People haven't gone out, etc. Temporary event notices have dropped substantially. This time last year, we had 181. Now we've got 23. So they've gone down a lot, but hopefully they'll start picking up early part of next year. Animal welfare licenses. Again, that's been intelligence led. If somebody requires a license, we've been contacting them, but no new pet shops, etc. have opened up within the borough. Again, you can see a big drop in the animal licensing applications. Freedom of information requests is a big thing again in licensing. Last year we had 13. This year we've had 12. They've all been replied to on time via our communications department. Enforcement purposes. We've been carrying out where required, where enforcement is required, acting on information received. We've been only on Friday, my team member was out with Henry visiting premises to give advice. So we've been working together with other teams, together with information from trading standards, fire service, planning, and carrying out enforcement work. Most of our time currently is spent on giving advice to off licenses, licensed premises, pubs, members of public ringing who want to start up new ventures, guiding them through the process. So the team's playing quite a big part. Just to give you an example, officers are working late in the evening, sometimes responding to emails at 7, 8 o'clock in the evening to ensure that people can start running businesses, try out new ventures, etc. So we're trying to support the businesses in Rugby as much as we can. Some officers have cancelled their leave and had to move their leave around so we can carry out all this work. I know we had a lot of requests come in regarding taxi trade struggling from various angles, but most of the trade contacts the team directly. They've been given advice and it was established that most of them were in a position to renew, and they've carried on as business as usual so far. Obviously we're still there to support anyone who's got any concerns. We'll try to work with them. It's a challenging time at the present time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zelfi. Where are we going now? Over to you, Henry, is it?
Yes, Chair, that'd be fine. Yeah. So thank you, Zelfi and David, for those kind words, David. Our commercial regulation team has been working throughout the pandemic under a new regime of legislation, which came into play at the end of March when the country went into a national lockdown, as you're probably all aware of. As part of Warwick, I'm just going to talk about regulation, and this will include licensed premises within it. So across the county, Warwickshire set up a joint regulatory meeting twice a week with our colleagues at Public Health, the police and trading standards to look at how we implement the regulations that came into play. And obviously licensed premises were closed down to sell any alcohol or be open to customers. And so we answered lots of queries, complaints about whether they were open, whether they were operating correctly, whether they were operating takeaway services, which they were allowed to do. So that was the start of the pandemic, and that took up an awful lot of time and still does do so. On the 4th of July, the licensed premises were allowed to be reopened under COVID secure, as long as they were COVID secure. So again, it was advice on risk assessments, doing visits to make sure premises have been COVID secure. We wrote to all of our licensed premises and advised how they could comply with the legislation. And Overall, our licensed premises have done what they've been asked to do. Looking at the figures over in Rugby, obviously the rates of infection have gone up in the last 3 or 4 weeks, which have been of concern as they have been nationally. But we've looked at how the spread is going on, and actually there's very low evidence of spread within our hospitality trades, although there has been some incidences, particularly towards the end of August, which we took action against and worked with those premises to improve themselves. With regards to the new legislation came in at the end of September, which introduced the 10 p.m. curfew. So again, we're working with businesses, the licensed premises that have to follow the 10 p.m. curfew, along with a number of other regulations which our licensed premises have to follow. The obligation regulations, which ensure that they can only have 6 people per bookings, signage, wearing a face mask within these premises, and any breaches we can of these regulations that we have to take enforcement action against, we'll consider requesting a licence review under the public safety objectives of the licence. So we are looking at those as well if we find breaches within licensed premises. And I think Zolfi's touched upon the temporary event notices and events. So with the recent rises, especially, we've been looking at temporary event notices, how they're being submitted fit in with the regulations. So previously to the current health protection coronavirus restriction regulations, which brought in the rule of 6, you could have an event of 30 people. Businesses can still have events over that, but they have to demonstrate that they're following all the rules and have a COVID risk assessment. We have actually refused, we've objected on public safety grounds on 2 temporary event notices, which were then subsequently withdrawn. So they didn't come to a hearing based on public safety and the fact that they couldn't control the risk of coronavirus transmission at those events. Currently, as you're probably aware, Rugby Borough Council is in Tier 1, so we're deemed as a medium risk, although with the figures as they are, that may change. Obviously, if we get up to Tier 3, then again, it would be looking at closing or the possibility of closing licensed premises down again, as they have done elsewhere in the country. So from a regulatory point of view, we've been very busy working very hard with our licensed premises, and I would like to say that on the whole, our licensed premises have responded very well to our advice. A lot of them have contacted us directly to get specific advice, and they've been very compliant with what they've been supposed to do. So I think that's it from me. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Henry. David, was that it from your team?
Yes, it is. As I mentioned before, we have got people like the community wardens who have been doing a lot of the enforcement as well right at the start, and are currently acting as the COVID marshals as well, and teams like the neighbourhoods team, which deals with nuisance. Because everyone has been at home, of course, the number of complaints has gone up massively about noise from people that are at home or being affected by noise while they're at home. So I can only reiterate, as I say, the exemplary work that the council as a whole has done to support this crisis, and I think that really does have to be recognised, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to do that.
No, on the contrary, thank you for all your hard work. Does anyone have any questions on the information that we've had from David and Zolfi and Henry? Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Henry a very quick question, if I may, Henry. I think we're running something like 96 per 100,000 or thereabouts, aren't we, in terms of people catching COVID? At what kind of level does it click into the Tier 2? I mean, places like Liverpool and Sheffield, I think, are in the 400 or 500s. We're on 96, maybe 100. Do we know what level takes us into Tier 2 from Tier 1?
Currently, we don't have that full information from central government. We've talked about that at quite a lot of meetings today, and we're still waiting further guidance on the new legislation from central government regarding Tier 1, Tier 2 and Tier 3. And I'm not going to speculate on a figure where it would take us into or not into at this stage. So I think we wait further guidance from central government on that, Councillor.
Yes, I think caution's our watchword on that one. Mike Brader, did you have your hand up?
Yes, please. Just a quick question, and also just to say as well, like, I think the work from the teams that we've all heard about has been fantastic, and running the food bank as well, that's really brilliant. I just wanted to ask quickly about workplace safety, specifically sort of what powers the teams had, if there was any complaints, for example, from employees about their workplaces not being safe or employees not following the safety precautions like social distancing, hand sanitising, whether that's anything that the council dealt with or whether that would be the health and safety executive.
Can I come in on that, Councillor Chair?
Please do.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brady. We have indeed had many complaints or queries about workplace safety, particularly in staff, and as things reopened. And yes, we do investigate those complaints. Some of the premises are, some of them are health and safety executive enforced. So where that is, we've been joint working with the health and safety executive. So we don't enforce health and safety in all premises across the borough, and depending on which sector of the workforce they are, depending on who actually enforces health and safety. But yes, certainly we have been given advice. We sent letters out to all what we deemed our high-risk workplaces in conjunction with Public Health Warwickshire, and we've been also following up on workplace outbreaks with our colleagues at Public Health Warwickshire to ensure that all workplaces have got the right controls in place. So yes, Councillor, that is something we are doing actively and following up on.
Thank you for that. And Sue Roodhouse.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to Zulfi's report and ask a question. I believe he said that 2 licences had been surrendered due to COVID, I think COVID related, as to whether any of the taxi drivers had actually caught COVID, and also what prevention methods they have in the taxis, as in masks, screens, etc. So that's a question for Zulfi. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roodhouse. The 2 vehicles that didn't renew, there were 2 vehicles they didn't renew. It wasn't due to them personally having COVID, it was due to the private hire work or work they had surrounding for those 2 vehicles. They didn't need the vehicle, so they didn't renew. From a trades point, nobody that we're aware of has had COVID, and we haven't been given any feedback regarding any drivers. We've kept in regular contact, but nobody's come to us saying that they've suffered COVID. We know that somebody has self-isolated due to a family member having COVID, but that's the closest. Reference what they're doing with the vehicles. From day one, they were in communication with us. They've got hand sanitizers in the vehicles, etc. Some of our wheelchair accessible vehicles have screens, but according to the guidance that we've seen, the screens do not stop the infection spreading. They do, however, clean the screens after customers. The drivers that do school runs have a check sheet where they have to go through various checks before they pick up their school run. And we're regularly in contact giving advice regarding masks. Myself and one of my officers, we were out last week speaking to every single driver on the rank regarding masks. They've all got masks. They're all wearing masks. And the other interesting and the good thing is they're complying, or most of them are, and asking passengers to put masks on unless they've got exemptions before getting into the vehicles.
Thank you, Zulfi. That was good.
Okay, any more questions at all? Right, so that completes item 5 then. So we'll go on to item 6 on the agenda. And item 6 is a motion to exclude the public under section 100 part A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. And we are to consider the following resolution: that under section 1A part A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of information defined in paragraphs 1, 2 and 3 of Schedule 12A of the Act. So we're going for a vote then. So those in favour?
Sorry, Chair, me again. Could we just have a proposer and seconder for the motion?
Sorry, I'm not doing very well this evening, am I?
It's all right. You haven't been in a meeting for a while, so that's why I'm here to keep you in check. Thank you.
I'm happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you,
And
Glenn.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so can we go for vote now, Sarah?
You may indeed.
Okay, the hands raising as usual, please.
Councillor Cade, I think we're just missing your hand.
Oh, I thought it was up. Right, okay, there it is, it's up now.
That's unanimous.
Okay, on the basis that's unanimous, I won't go for against or abstentions or anything. Thank you very much.
That's great. Maria, could I ask you to turn the live stream off and then we'll continue once you've confirmed? Thank you.
Thank you.